He silently screamed when he realized that he no longer had access to your energy. He moved through life believing your presence would always remain within reach, certain that no distance could ever truly separate him from the warmth, the peace, and the quiet strength that surrounded you so naturally. And because he became comfortable with your energy always being there, he stopped recognizing how deeply it carried him through moments of confusion, loneliness, and hidden emptiness that he never fully admitted, even to himself. Yet, there came a day when the connection no longer flowed toward him the way it once had, and the realization entered his spirit slowly at first, before striking him all at once with the force of a truth too heavy to escape. A silence settled inside him the moment he understood that your energy was no longer available for him to return to whenever life became too cold, too uncertain, or too difficult to face alone. And though no sound left his mouth, something within him cried out with unbearable intensity, because loss becomes louder when a person finally understands the value of what they treated as permanent, and nothing shakes the human heart more deeply than discovering too late that access to someone's light was never guaranteed forever. The world around him continued moving normally, while something inside him quietly unraveled, because outward appearances often hide the deepest collapses. And the same person who once carried himself with certainty suddenly found himself wandering through ordinary days with an unfamiliar heaviness pressing against his thoughts, unable to escape the understanding that your presence has become woven into parts of his life he never even noticed while you were still close enough to touch. Your energy had filled spaces inside him that he did not know were empty until they were forced to stand exposed without your warmth covering them anymore. And every memory of your patience, your calmness, your understanding, and your quiet way of bringing peace into chaotic moments returned to him with painful clarity, because absence has a way of revealing importance more honestly than closeness ever can, and people rarely recognize how much comfort they are receiving while it is still being freely given. A strange kind of grief followed him after the realization, not the loud kind that announces itself openly, but that silent kind that sits heavily in the chest during quiet hours of the night, that kind that appears unexpectedly in crowded places, familiar songs, empty conversations, and moments where the distraction suddenly fades, forcing the truth to rise again, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it beneath pride or routine. Nothing reached him the same way anymore, because substitutes can imitate connection without ever replacing it, and every attempt to fill absence only reminded him more clearly that what he lost carried a depth impossible to recreate through temporary attention, surface level affection, or shallow distractions, since real energy leaves an imprint too distinct to be copied once it disappears from someone's life. He began replaying old moments repeatedly in his mind, remembering conversations he once rushed through, remembering the softness in your voice during difficult days, and remembering the calm feeling that followed your presence even in silence. And every memory became sharper after distance entered the story, because the mind has a cruel habit of illuminating what mattered most only after it becomes unreachable. An awakening slowly unfolded inside him as the weight of reality settled deeper into his spirit, and for the first time, he was forced to confront how much of his emotional stability had depended on access to your energy. Because while you remained near, he never had to fully face the emptiness living quietly beneath the surface of his own life. Yet, once your light was removed from his reach, every hidden fracture became impossible to ignore. The spaces that once felt alive now carried an unfamiliar coldness to him, and places connected to your presence suddenly felt haunted by what no longer existed there, because certain people bring an atmosphere with them that changes environments without effort. And once that atmosphere disappears, the emptiness left behind becomes impossible not to notice. The silent desperation grew inside him while he attempted to appear unaffected to everyone around him. Because the human ego fears being exposed more than it fears suffering itself, and admitting how deeply he depended on your energy would have forced him to confront truths he spent a long time avoiding. So instead, he carried the ache quietly while pretending everything remained unchanged. Still, the truth continued following him into every quiet moment, whispering reminders that your energy had supported him emotionally in ways he only recognized after losing access to it completely. And that realization humbled him, because people often assume certain connections will remain available forever, never considering that distance can arrive suddenly and permanently without warning. He started understanding that your presence had become a source of emotional grounding for him, a kind of unspoken safety that steadied parts of his inner world without demanding recognition. And once that grounding disappeared, his thoughts became louder, his rest became weaker, and the silence around him became heavier than before. Every attempt to move forward without acknowledging the loss only deepened the emptiness he carried, because ignored pain does not disappear. It simply changes shape and waits quietly beneath the surface until something small reopens it again. And he found himself feeling your absence in ordinary moments where he least expected it, moments that once felt insignificant but now carried the weight of memory. He eventually understood that your energy was never something he truly possessed, only something he temporarily experienced, and the loss forced him to confront how much he had relied on your presence without ever fully acknowledging its importance while it was still beside him. Because familiarity often blinds people to the rarity of what they hold until absence restores their vision too late. The silent scream remained inside him long after the separation happened, not because he lacked words, but because some realizations cut too deeply for language to fully carry them, and the knowledge that he no longer had access to your energy followed him everywhere like an invisible truth carved permanently into his spirit. From that moment forward, he carried the understanding that some connections are far more life-changing than they first appear, and some losses reveal their depth only after the door closes completely, leaving nothing behind except memory, regret, and the haunting awareness that certain forms of light never return once they decide to leave.